Welcome, everybody. This is session 3 of the NBCEC Brown Bagger series, and we appreciate everybody joining us today. As always, our website is there, and that's where these sessions will be posted once we get them up. Might take a little while to get that done, but they will be posted on the NBCEC website that is still live and active and there for your enjoyment. My name is Darrh Bullock. I am the host of today's session. I'm at the University of Kentucky Extension Professor, and I appreciate it, the opportunity to do this. I want to also recognize my colleagues, Dr. Bob Weber and Dr. Matt Spangler. The three of us make up the committee for this Brown Bagger series, and I think we've decided it's now our 17th year. Shout out to Darrell Strobing. He was one of the originators as well. So, but as everybody knows, Darrell's been retired here for a little bit, but it's been going for a long time, and hopefully getting some good education out to everybody. We try and keep this informative, educational, and a little bit on cutting edge the best we can to hopefully help prepare you guys. This is officially a train the trainer type session, so hopefully you're taking this information and getting it out to the producers that can use it. Today's topic is going to be, why do genetic evaluations have to change? And that's a question that those of us in the education side of things, and I know the breed associations struggle with all the time, because anytime there's change, that brings a lot of angst to a lot of people. And so today, hopefully we can kind of tell you why that's the case. I try and get my producers to think about it from the perspective of, when they change, yes, you have bulls that go up or down or one direction or another, but hopefully the new evaluation that we have is better than the one it's replacing. So at least we can, I feel that we can with confidence say that each change does at least bring in improvement. We have two speakers today. We have Mr. Shane Bedwell and Dr. Randie Culbertson that are going to share with us on from a couple of different perspectives, and I appreciate them being on, and I'll give them their introductions as we introduce each topic. So first up today is going to be Shane Bedwell. Shane is the Chief Operating Officer and Director of Breed Improvement at American Hereford Association. With American Hereford, Shane oversees the association's genetic evaluation and national reference sire program. Before Shane came to American Hereford, he spent a few years at Colorado State University. I think a lot of that was working with the judging team and all, but he was there for a time period there at Colorado State. Shane grew up on a cow-calf and stocker ranch near Medicine Lodge, Kansas. He received his bachelor's from Kansas State and then got a master's from the University of Illinois. And Shane's going to talk to us today about why has changed better, Hereford changes to genetic evaluation. So Shane, I am going to turn off my video, and I'm actually going to mute myself before I give you control, because then things mess up if I do it again. So here, let's see if we can get this done. Appreciate you being with us, Shane.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Darrh. Appreciate the opportunity to join this group, and consider it a privilege to get on and share some of the information and changes that we've had at the American Hereford Association here in the last few years, and just kind of share a little bit about those changes and how they've impacted our genetic evaluation, and maybe help a few others out in taking that information out to some of the producers if you potentially get questions relative to the Hereford genetic evaluation, and hopefully share a little bit of insight in that regard. So kind of my title here today is What's Changed with the American Hereford Association's genetic evaluation. And the first slide I kind of brought up, kind of spent some time searching the web on some different quotes and different pictures that talk about change. And there on the top left, change is going to the right, and the old ways to the left. And I think it's important, and at least something that we tried to think about when we implemented a lot of these changes about 3 years ago, was that the old ways are good, and without them, we couldn't be where we're at today, and the progress that we've made without kind of those fundamental concepts of the basics of EPDs and how they're calculated, the beginning with performance recording and how they were incorporated in to the pedigree relationships and taking the simple average mean of the sire and dam. And so, as we make changes, I think it's important to remember that, the old way, or what we were doing before these changes, weren't necessarily wrong or incorrect. We've just been able to keep up with technology and make those advancements and improve on them. And really, hopefully, all of the changes that we are making are improvements to our genetic evaluation. And just like any other business model, you almost have to change to keep current and to stay progressive with the times and the demand of information that producers, for the most part, are wanting, and what this industry is driving us to. The other one I kind of put in here: change is a process, not an event. And, as we work through changes, it is simply a change in our process. It's not a defining moment per se, and an event, even though I'm going to talk about here in another slide a date that's pretty concrete in my mind. A quote from Henry Ford says, "If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got." And I think as the genetic evaluation technologies and advancements continue to develop, hopefully we'll be able to look back in 10, 20 years and say, wow, that was really instrumental in being able to ramp up genetic selection and put us in a target direction a lot faster than what we intended. And I think that is the challenge, is that producers want all information right at their fingertips. That is, if the information is agreeable with them. And as fast as we run genetic evaluations today, weekly, and that information is coming back, and as they're beginning to market their seed stock animals, when it comes back in disagreement or to a way that they didn't think it was going to, it upsets folks, and that is tough. And I get that as a cattle producer, and how you have your hopes really set high on an animal, and the information comes back in an unfavorable way. But knowing that information early on in that animal's life is definitely a good thing, and hopefully that's better than passing those genetics on later in life and finding out what we could have known a couple years ago. Another quote there from Socrates: "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but building the new." And I think that's what's progressive and good about these sessions. I think the team of Bob and Matt and Darrh, what they do, and the science community that's behind a lot of these discoveries and advancements, is building the new and continuing to develop. Because, honestly, I really feel as we've made these advancements, we're just kind of on the beginning of what this technology and our software can handle. And it'll really be neat to see how we progress from here. So everybody has specific dates in their mind, whether it's a birthday, an anniversary, child's birth, Christmas. One date that I'll remember for the rest of my life is December 4th, 2017. And that's when the American Hereford Association made several changes to the genetic evaluation that we're currently running today, whether that be model changes, changes in how we handle the genomic component, different data, quality assurance strategies, and updates of new traits into the genetic evaluation. We made a lot of changes at once, and that is the goal, to make not necessarily a bunch of changes at once, but it's been our experience, if you're going to make changes, it is good to do it at one time rather than a multiple times over, a period of 2 months, and to get those bits of information out there to explain what changes you might see. And we tried to do that ahead of the release of our genetic evaluation updates. But honestly, until it affects the individual member or the customer that's tied to those numbers, they don't really maybe embrace the changes until you get the phone call from them. And, we continued for a good amount of time, and we still get questions today that go back to some of these changes. And it's just when those producers kind of realize that impact. And, education is continual, and being able to talk about the differences, I think, is very important. So a little bit about our genetic evaluation. It is a Pan-American cattle evaluation with 4 countries, including the Canadian Hereford Association, Uruguayan Hereford Association, and Argentina Association. That was initiated in 2009, and was a great collaboration to be able to run a global evaluation with those 4 countries to extend commerce between these countries, and be able to see how bulls are doing in different continents, and be able to have that overlap with our genetic evaluation. We relaunched that effort in 2019, and basically the 2 South American countries were able to migrate to our marker effects model from currently what we were running with the old PACE. That includes the new updated marker effects model. And so we launched the North American Hereford evaluation in 17. The South American countries weren't quite ready at that point, and as we relaunched that evaluation in 2019, that correlation was very, very high, 0.95 and 0.995, excuse me. And so really not a lot of change with the inclusion of that South American data, but it is helpful, it's insightful, and we're excited that we're back to that Pan American cattle evaluation. Specifically with our AHA evaluation, we calculate EPDs for 17 traits and 3 indices. We utilize the marker effects model with the Bolt software, and I know there's been a lot of discussion in these brown bagger sessions on the marker effect model using single-step genomics, and that was the transition that we moved from in 2017, where we were using the post-evaluation blending method with the molecular breeding values and a correlated approach with genomics, and it was definitely the best technology that we had available at the time. And I think a lot of you folks on here use that or some model version of that. And as we move to the single step version of including the direct marker effects into an animal's EPD profile, I think it was certainly a very, very good step that helped us better or more closely learn exactly what those animals are getting in that mating. Our performance extract is a little over 2.5 million animals, nearly have 120,000 genotypes in our evaluation, and we release an updated EPD analysis or genetic evaluation every week on Monday in the AM. So the suite of traits that we have here just kind of pulled up a bull's profile, and it kind of shows several of those EPDs from left to right, along with the dollar indexes. And it's certainly, I think, on producers' minds, and I think a challenge as we go forward and as we develop so many of these key economically relevant traits, like a few that we've added here in the last few years that have definitely been key to getting at progress in the key traits of interest when it comes to like carcass weight, mature cow weight, dry matter intake, sustained cow fertility. Those are fairly new EPDs and very critical EPDs in my opinion. But what EPDs do you take away when you add some of these new traits that are very keen and very important to us? And as you can see, we haven't taken any traits away. We've just simply added more. And so I think it brings a new challenge in itself, and being able to try to help producers understand not only why you added these traits, but maybe what traits they need to use in their specific operations. And it comes back to the fact of which ones are truly economically relevant to their production setting and what their goals need to be. With that, in 2017, because of the addition of sustained cow fertility and dry matter intake, and along with carcass weight being a new trait in 2016, along with mature cow weight, we thought we really needed to update our dollar indices with those key economically relevant traits because all three of our indexes are geared through the total production chain through a finishing setting. And those cattle, for the most part, are marketed on a grid. And having those key drivers instead of those correlated traits that we had prior. And, I think that is one thing to mention. Without having that good correlated data, we wouldn't really be able to get on some of these traits to where we're at today. And so you really need them. We still need them, but the development and the key points of these economically relevant traits are critical going forward. And then we've developed some commercial programs around these indexes and rely on them heavily for our market of germplasm to the commercial industry. One other big step that we made in 2017 and really had the luxury to do because our genetic evaluation is backed by whole herd TPR, and gave a presentation on Monday night, and I give credit to our board of directors and their vision and just what they stood for at that time when it was maybe not as popular to really put some compliancy to our performance program to allow these producers to really shine and get an unbiased look of what their genetics were truly doing in their herd, so fair comparisons could be made. And so as we were kind of going through our genetic evaluation and as we started looking at the data, we thought this was a really good move to make. And so what we did is basically pruned the data prior to whole herd TPR, the performance data prior to 2001, and also included 3 generations of pedigree data that were connected to those animals starting at 2001, and are proud to say that our genetic evaluation is solely backed by the performance piece of it, backed by whole herd TPR. And so all of these changes that we make and we go through are backed by what the correlations look like to old analysis or the current analysis. And as you can see on, the animals that are more proven in data, the whole data set at an accuracy, of 0.5 or a reduced 0.5 accuracy and a smaller subset of 2014 animals at that time that were basically 3 years of age. The correlations on, the four main traits were pretty darn high. And I think most would agree that that's basically the same trait. And that leap that we made, I think, was definitely a good set. And we saw an increase, in accuracy as we move forward with that. And I think as we released an updated set of EPDs on animals, I thought producers, the feedback that we gained from them was that, this is actually doing a pretty good job. And even though some old bulls lost a few progeny from that data cutoff strategy in between that time, I think as we go forward and we continue to go forward, it's going to be a great move that we made pruning off some of that older data that would have had some biased reporting associated with it. Just a cleaner data set for us to use. Another thing that we did in our genetic evaluation update in 2017 was moved away from a full multi-trait correlated model and basically decoupled some of those that fully correlated model into smaller clusters. And I'll show you those here in a little bit of what those models look like. Correlated data is essential, and we still operate in that manner today. But we basically kind of chunked it up and centered ourselves around those specific models with some correlated data. But our whole goal and what we were able to show was that we basically got a better estimation of the traits of interest that we were associated with and where we wanted to make progress on, where producers could have a better look at that. And I'll share a little bit about those models here as we go. So, the birth, weaning, and yearling and maternal milk model, would have been correlated with several other traits, and we kind of broke that apart. And, what's highlighted here in bold letters is basically what comes out of that model. And as we went through here, and you can see, I'll just pull all these up here at once. But, it really, I think, was a good move. And as we worked through this part of this exercise, we would have had correlations ranging in the 0.85 to 0.98 range as far as rank correlations from model to model. One kind of area as we move into some of the carcass traits that we report, because of the fact that we get so many records with birth records, weaning records, yearling weight records, compared to, say, ultrasound records, and specifically actual carcass data. We thought that some of our data was maybe getting swamped with all of the correlated information in there, and so we kept our key weaning weight trait in that carcass weight and carcass ribeye model to be able to use that correlated data when ultrasound or scan ribeye or actual hot carcass weight or actual ribeye was not being utilized or not being reported to us, where those animals could still get an estimate on carcass weight and carcass ribeye. But what we wanted to do was to reward those producers that are participating in some of our progeny test programs, sending in actual carcass data for their information to really shine through and offer some definite, just to get a clearer picture of it. And again, we wouldn't have done that if we couldn't prove that we had, some very high correlations, and this one was definitely high in the 0.9 range. And so we thought it gave a clearer picture, and it still offered us what we'd had before, but just in a more precise way. And that is kind of the theme as we move through these models and what we've been able to develop. One thing with that, as we updated in 2017, because of the majority of genotyping that had been done was mainly done on males and bulls, we weren't able to include the marker effects model for the maternal traits. And so we initiated a cow herd project to round up females. We collected over 10,000 new female genotypes, and this allowed us to be able to get in and do the research to be able to let those models converge properly and add all the additional data that we had after 2017 and show and prove that model could work appropriately. I think one thing that was neat from that initiative, and one thing that I think is a good testament to our breeders and what they're doing, this is a graph that kind of shows the progression of male genotypes compared to female genotypes over time. And I think it speaks a lot to the investment of our breeders, of the time that they've spent collecting female genotypes. Obviously, the cow herd project helped elevate those numbers, but as we continue to move forward here in 2019, those cow herd numbers wouldn't have been a part of that. And more and more producers are sampling those females, and I think that is a key breed improvement step that they are doing for their herds and utilizing that information. So I think that's very positive and a very positive step forward with what they're doing in their belief in the genomic tool and getting animals genomically enhanced. A couple of slides here as we completed that research here this last spring. We were able to add the maternal effects model to Calving's maternal and milk, and you can see a very high correlation of animals at a 0.1 accuracy and higher of 0.982 for Calving's maternal and a 0.984 for milk. And so, non-parent animals, obviously, that didn't maybe have some of those traits, those harder to measure traits that you get later on in life, do experience more change potentially than your parent animals that do have those production traits. But as a whole, relative to the population, this was a good step that we moved forward with, being able to give producers that genomic contribution of those younger animals. Kind of finish up here with the frequency of genetic evaluations. And this has definitely evolved over time since I've been at the American Hereford Association. I think traditionally when you think about the reports of genetic evaluations, it was a fall and spring sire summary. We got that data twice a year, and everybody really looked forward to getting the old tabloid kind of style printout of that sire summary, or they used to say we used to mail all those out, and people really craved that information, and rightfully so. We graduated from that step when we were still running the blended method to once a month, and now we're operating once a week. And producers say, why is it changing? Why is it updating so often? I don't like this. I hate seeing the changes. And I kind of alluded to that prior, but one thing with that and what we've shared with producers is that these changes were happening behind the scenes. This data was accumulating as it came into our performance system, every week or every day when they turned in data and information bites. And so it was basically setting in the system. And with the interim EPD system that we were using prior, you could see that through ratios. And so you kind of had a pretty good idea what these animals were going to do from month to month when the new analysis updated, or from that fall and spring sire summary and what would change. But it never was really incorporated in the EPD. And I think as we go forward with the EPD information, it's critical to use the EPD, and ratios and performance data is certainly possible, or certainly important. But without that critical information, we couldn't get at that point. So, here's just kind of a very busy kind of a table with our national reference sire data that we collect from the Olson herd, that shows all those phenotypes that we get periodically throughout the year. And that carcass data really doesn't come back to us until about mid-December. And so with bull cell catalogs being printed, with folks starting to begin their breeding season process, when we were just running 2 evaluations a year, this data wouldn't hit until July. Prior to that, and basically you go through or lose a breeding season without knowing some of the best data that we collect here at the American Hereford Association through our progeny test, our sire program. Those producers really weren't getting, or they weren't getting it reflected in the expected progeny difference, and our membership was really not getting the benefit of what they should have been. And so, that weekly evaluation, everything runs into it, and we're able to report that information almost in real time. I know Bruce Golden, has talked with the capabilities about potentially running daily analysis, and I know there's some that run pretty often in other species, and I don't know if I'm quite ready for that, guys, but weekly genetic evaluation definitely includes, the most relevant and up-to-date information. And I think that's definitely a good thing. So with that, Darrh, I'll turn it back over to you and answer any questions at this time.
I appreciate it, Shane. I'm not sure. I was having a little bit of internet issues on my end. I hope everybody heard the very last of it. It skipped out on me, and I changed servers real quick, so I'm not sure exactly. Hopefully everybody got that, but it was going good till right up to the end anyway. So does anybody have any questions? If you would, if you could put them in the Q&A part or the chat, we'll be happy to get to them. And I guess while you're thinking about or trying to put some of those in, I do have a question for you, Shane. What do you, and I hate to, I'm going to take you into an area that's kind of probably human nature, and I don't know how much of an expert you are there, but why do you think people do lose confidence when we, put change in there? When it does change, it's almost like they want to believe the old more so than the new. What do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. We do such a good job in several education efforts, and of communicating with folks about the reliability of EPDs, the accuracy of EPDs, and the value of them. And there's been a lot of effort in that arena. That producers, the ones that have believe in EPDs, they have bought into that concept. And it's almost like you pull the rug out from underneath them in a way. And I think, on young, unproven animals, even with, all the traits being measured, the phenotypes being measured and turned in on those animals, the genomics being ran on them, we can't forget the possible change table that animals still can see later on in life. I mean, it's they're still fairly low accuracy. Animals do change and do move, And, so I think that is one thing that, has helped, not necessarily to your question, Darrh, but to building that confidence in. And again, back to, one part of your question is that, what we've done before, again, was very good. We're just building upon it and just trying to make it better, and that's been trying, the message that I've tried to send out.
Yep, I would agree with you. And we have another question from Mike Davis, and I'm going to let you take a look at that one. I think we need to move on and go ahead and get Randie on, but we will handle more questions for Shane if you have them. So put them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll cover that at the end. But just in the interest of time, I want us to move on. Shane, I really do appreciate you bringing us that information. And sharing with us today, and we'll get back to you. Don't leave us.
Very good. Thanks, Darrh.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. So our next up, the part 2 of this session is why do genetic evaluations have to change? Or I'm sorry, that was our main topic, but this is going to be Dr. Randie Culbertson is going to talk about the validation of genetic evaluation system model enhancement at IGS. And let me tell you a little bit about Randie. Randie might not be as familiar to some of you, a little bit newer on the scene, but Dr. Randie Culbertson is a graduate of Colorado State. That's where she got both her master's and her PhD. I think she got her undergraduate degree from New Mexico State. But Randie is originally from New Mexico, where she grew up on her family's cattle ranch, located near northern New Mexico, or located in northern New Mexico. Randie is now in her current position is the lead geneticist for International Genetic Solutions, or IGS, and she started there in November of 2019, just in time for a pandemic to hit. So anybody getting started, but Randie, it's probably better that you at least were started. I think some folks might not be in quite as good a position actually looking for jobs. So it's really good that Randie's there now with IGS. And we appreciate what you guys are doing. And if you would share with us now the validation of the genetic evaluation system model enhancements that you guys are doing at IGS. Once again, I'm going to need to hit the mute, and then I'm going to give you control. And then remember, you will have to click on the screen for it to give you control. And then you should be able to use the arrow buttons and all there at the bottom.
Great, thanks, Darrh.
Hang on, I'm still looking for trying to give you control, and I'm not seeing that. Is it, Randie, is it still sharing my screen? Do you see that at least?
I just see your headshot. I don't see any slides up yet.
I don't suppose Bob got back on. For some reason, it's not treating me as the host anymore, and I don't know if it's because I had to come back into it from a different thing, but it's not letting. There we go. Think we might be back in luck. How about now?
Well, this is looking promising.
All right, good. Let me there, and I'm going to now mute myself again and now give you.
So as Darrh mentioned, I am the geneticist working at IGS. My name is Randie Culbertson, and I want to thank everybody for giving me the opportunity to speak today. And today what I was going to talk about was some validation work that we did with the IGS evaluation. We recently just went through a big update on our growth evaluation. And I was going to just talk today about the process that we went through to validate these updates. Because one of the most uncomfortable phone calls, and the phone call that I dread getting from a producer, is when I have a breeder call me, say that he bought a bull in the spring. We made these updates to the evaluation, and now this bull that he spent a lot of money on in the spring is not nearly as valuable because his EPDs have changed. And it's not anything that the breeder did per se, but we made updates to the evaluation, and now suddenly his bull has changed rank and those EPD values changed. And so when we go to make these updates, that's a really uncomfortable conversation to have with a producer or a breeder. But when we have the validation to say, we know these updates are doing a better job of prediction. We know that some bulls are going to be affected negatively, but we also know that other animals are going to be affected in a positive manner. So it helps to have that conversation with producers, because in theory, we know that these updates are going to improve the evaluation, but we also want to be able to say that we've proven that these updates are going to improve prediction. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, is just our validation process. For any of you out there who don't know what IGS is, IGS stands for International Genetic Solutions. We're a multi-breed genetic evaluation, which the multi-breed aspect definitely brings about certain challenges to the evaluation to incorporating all these breeds. We're currently publishing over 19 million EPDs weekly, and we have approximately 20 partners. And these partners consist of breed associations in the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, as well as some genotype companies that are partners as well. And this number is growing. So we have numerous conversations with other breed associations or commercial entities that want to join IGS, and to start, so we can start publishing EPDs for them. So this is an ongoing conversation. So we're always growing, and with this brings new challenges and new things that we need to test as well as validate. So as I mentioned, in August, we implemented some updates to our growth evaluation. It's what we refer to as Work Order 1. These updates, there were several changes with these updates, one of which was an increase in the marker subsets that we use in our evaluation, as well as improvements to the estimation of those marker effects. We also looked to update how we account for different methods for the collection of birth weight. So how we're going to use hoof tape data, as well as birth weights measured by a scale. We also set our genetic correlation between milk and weaning weight to 0. Prior to that, in the previous production runs, we had that set to a -0.3. And we also set the heterogeneous variances were set to a male base. So these were some of the big changes that we were looking to implement with Work Order 1. So like I said before, in theory, the theory was that this was going to improve prediction. The question was, how can we actually show that it does? So with our initial run, so Bruce Golden proposed these changes with Work Order 1. We ran a test run, and we looked at the EPD means for, over several birth years of the animals. We compared these means between the old production run and what Work Order 1 what we would see the changes with work order 1. And as you can see in this graph, there's nothing really exciting going on. We see a slight increase with weaning weight, an increase with yearling weight, as well as milk. Birth weight stays about the same. But when we look at the correlations between the previous production run and work order 1, we start to see some changes. So birth weight stays in the high 0.9s. We start to see a little bit of a drop in the correlation between these two models for weaning weight and yearling weight, but probably the most concerning drop was this drop in milk. And the big question is, what's going on there? Why are we seeing this change in these correlations? And, you know, how can we go through and say which model was doing a better job of prediction? So we've spent several months looking at work order 1 and trying to evaluate it. So the method that Dr. Madi Sachi applied for the validation was to evaluate the predictive ability between the two. So how we went about doing this was we took the growth phenotypes and the contemporary groups for animals born in 2018 and later, and we masked that data. And what we mean by masked is basically we went in and set their phenotypes and those contemporary groups to unknown. We then used this, these test animals as, so these, the data set with this masked data was the input files that we used to run through a production evaluation and a work order 1 evaluation run. And we ran both of these with the masked data. And then we looked at Pearson correlations between the EPDs and the phenotypes of the test animals. And these phenotypes were adjusted phenotypes. So they were adjusted for age of dam, breed, as well as for contemporary group. And we use this Pearson correlation because this basically gives us, allows us to compare the predictive ability between different evaluations. Now, the biggest challenge we had was, how do we validate milk? Because what is that phenotype for milk? In beef cattle, we don't measure milk. It's based on the maternal effect for weaning weight. So for this validation, we used a Pearson correlation between the calf residual weaning weight phenotype and the expected weaning weight. And this expected weaning weight was the calf's weaning weight EPD plus the dam's milk EPD. So this is what we used as part of that validation to validate milk. Something else we wanted to look at is there were a number of changes. So we wanted to look at to see which of these particular changes in work order 1 would, you know, potentially affect the amount of predictability that we are seeing between the two models. So we went through and tested each individual change. So for example, we had our new marker subset. So we took the new marker subset that we were using in work order 1, we put it in the old production run, and we kind of substituted those the new marker subsets for what we were already using in that production run. We substituted that, we ran a production run, and with our test set, and we looked at those correlations. On the flip side, we also took the marker subset that we were currently using in production, looked at that, and we, placed that into the work order 1 evaluation, ran that evaluation, and we looked at those correlations as well. We also we tested the contemporary groups. So there were some proposed changes for our contemporary groups and how we define contemporary groups in work order 1. So we applied those definitions for contemporary groups into the production run, and we ran that with our test animals, our test input file. We also took the traditional contemporary groups from production, put that into the work order run, and we ran that. And what we found is there was very little change in prediction or in those Pearson correlations for these contemporary group changes. So in the end, we decided to not adopt these changes in the work order 1 updates just because there wasn't enough gain in prediction to really justify the amount of changes that would have to, the breed associations would have to go through, all our partners would have to go through to update for these contemporary group changes. So the results from this, from our validation is, so these are the results from our test animals. So for birth weight in production, the predictive ability was about a 0.5. And we see that this correlation increases to a 0.52 for work order 1. For weaning weight, we see an increase as well from a 0.34 to a 0.38. Yearling weight, 0.37 to 0.45. And milk, we see an increase of 0.39 to 0.42. So we felt pretty comfortable based on our validations and our testing that work order 1 would be doing a better job of prediction. So although we felt comfortable with these changes, it doesn't mean that we automatically put it into live production. We still continued testing. So whenever we have a proposed change to our evaluation, we conduct some beta testing. And this is any change we place, so any change in the evaluation, we actually test in kind of a parallel run. So these EPDs are not published. We will release them to the partners for those who are proposing the change or any new partners coming in. We conduct this beta testing. And this gives us a chance to really work out any bugs that we might have with the increase of data, and also allows us to test these changes to see how it's going to affect the evaluation. So we run our beta test. We take these, in the case of work order 1, we also wanted to test the effect of these changes on our growth evaluation to any other evaluations such as Carkets that uses some of this growth information as a correlated trait. And we were pretty confident it wouldn't have much effect, but we like to test that just to make sure we're not surprised or something unexpected kind of creeps up. Whenever we conduct a beta test, we release it to any potential new partners. In the case with work order 1, we ran about 3 or 4 beta tests, and we released those results to the partners, to the IGS partners. This gave them, our partners, an opportunity to look over these EPDs and scrutinize and really look into what something, into animals that are high use bulls and so forth, and allowed the partners to really look at it and ask questions. So we released it to the partners, then they could follow up and say, certain animals moved, what is causing this movement? And because of the validation work that we had done, it was pretty easy for us to go in and say, this is the movement that we're seeing. It kind of helped us narrow in where to look for these and where we would expect to see these changes. So it really helped us with answering questions for partners. So like I said, we ran about three or 4 beta runs. And so the beta test, the most current beta test is then correlated to what is currently in production. So with work order 1, we anticipated some drops in our the correlations to milk, but we also run the most current beta to the previous beta as well. So this gives us a chance to kind of see from beta run to beta run if there were any changes. And with implementing work order 1, there were a lot of changes going on, a lot of moving parts. This allowed us to kind of work out the bugs so that when it went live, we could hopefully minimize any of the disruptions during the evaluation, and had, our hope was to eliminate any bugs that would happen during the week. Unfortunately, we still had 1 or 2 bugs, but they were pretty minor. So we were able to get it up and going. And so the first week of publishing work order 1 EPDs actually went off with only a few little hitches, but we got everything published on time. So another check that we work on with the evaluations is every week. So we're running weekly evaluations. So for work order 1, we're about 10 weeks out from the first time we published work order 1. Our evaluation finishes over the weekend, and there's a post-processing process that looks at correlations, calculates the base adjustments, applies those to the EPDs, and publishes EPD averages. So we look at those. If those correlations, we would expect to be in the 0.99, because we're looking at, basically, we're just looking at evaluations a week apart. So if we see correlations dropping below a 0.99, I'm going to be digging in and looking to see what is causing those changes and kind of scrutinizing, is this a change we expect, or is there something potentially going on? So like with work order 1, even though it's been out the door for a couple of weeks, we're still monitoring it every week to make sure that these evaluations are running as we expect. Another thing that we also look at are base adjustments. So the base adjustments should be pretty constant from week to week. And if we start to see changes in those base adjustments, it's usually an indication that something might be not quite right in the evaluation. And when we made the transition from production to work order 1, we of course had some changes in those base adjustments. Now, when we do our beta tests and we sent those beta results out to our partners, we did have some cases where partners came back and said, we have some big movement. In particular, one breed had a drop in EPD averages when compared to the production run. So when we really went in and looked at it, we were able to really pinpoint what was causing that drop. And based on our validation, we could say, we're pretty confident that this is going to improve prediction with this change. So this helps the breed associations also talk to their producers and their breeders to help with these transitions. So like I said, work order 1's been in place for about 10 weeks now. Overall, the feedback has been generally positive. Like I said, we do have 1 or 2 phone calls where a bull has dropped, but the flip side, some animals go down and some go up. The most common change that we've been seeing in the EPDs has been due to a change in the marker effects. So like I said, we now have a larger marker subset, as well as we're doing a better job of really estimating those marker effects. So animals that had some pretty significant movement from the previous production and model compared to work order 1 model, most of that has been associated with changes in marker effects. But like I said, for the most part, the fact that we had the validation, it really helped us with the conversation moving forward of why we made these changes. We're comfortable with these changes, that we are improving prediction. And it just helps to further that conversation of, modeling is going to change, theories are going to improve, the models are going to improve, our computing power is going to improve. We need to keep moving forward that. But at the same time, we need a way to validate, to look, to help us justify why we're making these changes. So with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you very much, Randie. And it looks like it's kind of a strange deal that whenever you have control, I'm not allowed to touch my mouse. So, but I saw some things popping up there. So I think we may have a few questions. Let me get in here. Okay, Shane answered. I'm going to have Shane do that again anyway, live, and talk to one. Let me see. All right. Lisa Crease Anderson is asking, what was the rationale of setting the genetic correlation between weaning weight and milk to 0? The scientific literature using Rimmel approaches for most breeds are at minus 0.3.
That is a great question, and that is a question that we debated back and forth in this transition to setting it. And it was it was a change that Bruce Golden had proposed, and we tested it. We didn't really find that it affected it really one way or the other. We do see that now with that not in place, if we have an increase in weaning weight, it often we'll see an increase in milk, whereas prior to that change, if we saw an increase to weaning weight, we'd see a slight decrease to milk. So I think a lot of the breeders seem to be happier with that change. But I think the change, it was just a change just to kind of help with the convergence in the model.
All right. If you have any follow-up, Lisa, just put it in there if you would. And while we're thinking about other questions, let's go back to that one. Shane, if you could get back on, let's get back to the question. I think you answered it, but how is sustained cow fertility calculated? If you don't mind giving us a verbal on that.
You bet, Darrh. Yeah, it's a random regression model that the phenotypes we use. The statistical model is a random regression model, and predicts the female's ability to have 10 calvings to the age of 12, as long as she calves as a 2-year-old. And then the phenotypes that are used for that are the years of cow herd inventory data that's turned in. That's a mandatory requirement from our producers, and their first step in reporting that phenotype, whether she bred back or she was cold, whatever the reason. But that's the phenotypes that are driving that EPD.
Okay, appreciate it. Any other questions? Like I said, if you would, just put them in the chat, or you can put them in the Q&A, and we'll try and get to them. Mike sends out a thank you, Shane. So satisfied answer there. So Randie, out of curiosity, I mean, I know there were, how many, when you went through the change, did it generate a lot of buzz, or was it relatively quiet on the home front when y'all put in the work order 1 changes? How much did it really impact the producers out in the country? Did you get a lot of phone calls, or how'd that go?
It was sort of yes and no. From the, we got a few phone calls from partners who just had some questions on why some certain animals had shifted a little bit. From the American Simmental Association, we did get some, there was some conversation about it. And it was kind of, 50-50. Like I said, I'd get a phone call saying a bull had dropped significantly. When we look it up, usually had to do with a drop in that marker effect had really shifted down pretty hard, which is why that animal, obviously the animal's EPDs shifted down as well. There was some discussion and, still some current discussion on how we handled the birth weights and things like that. But for the most part, I think, the feedback's been pretty positive, and it was kind of, there's a lot of emails and a lot of phone calls for a couple of weeks, but it's been dying down. Although I hate to say that, I feel like I should knock on wood. But yeah, the conversation's definitely been getting a little bit quieter now that it's been out for a couple of weeks. I think everybody's kind of adjusted.
Yeah, well, that's good. And this question is actually for both of you, because we deal with it kind of on our end here as well. Is when you have somebody put in genomic information and that makes the change. I mean, that's a pretty easy one to say that, we're improving the predictability of your bull. I know it doesn't ever, make the producer happy to hear that. I'm curious, do you have folks that start questioning, well, can I pull that data out? I think I know the answer to that, but do you have folks that once they get the genomics information and it didn't go the direction they wanted, do they try and ever back out, or how do y'all handle those? I'm sure that's where you get a lot of questions these days. Neither one of you wants to answer that one, I guess.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I have not personally had a request like that. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody else in ASA hasn't had that request and it just never got channeled up to me. But I have not had that request per se.
Yeah, Darrh, we haven't had that specific question, but a few years ago, would have been in the summer of 2017, before we made all of our evaluation updates, we did allow our breeders to run a parentage panel only. And then we had the genomic profile and then our abnormalities and all that together. And I thought our board made a pretty progressive decision in that every animal that was going to be DNA tested for whatever reason was going to get the genomic bit with it. And we believed in the system. We believe in the technology and the advancements that it can make. And so I thought that was a good decision. We do get over time, because of some folks that maybe are just a little cautious, that have experienced some pretty drastic change in some of the animals that they've genotyped. They would like to go back and just parentage test them only. But again, I think for the advancement of our breed, being able to stick to that policy is a good one. And knowing all we can earlier in life is certainly good.
Yep, I agree. I was kind of curious because we have a bull cost share program here through our tobacco settlement program. And starting next year, any bulls to get cost share, they have to have been genomically tested. And so I'm just curious as to how many phone calls I'm going to start getting next year when bulls start going the wrong direction. So just a curiosity question. I appreciate the answers. Not seeing anything else come through on the chat or question side, so I guess they're going to let you guys off pretty easy today. But I do want to thank both Shane and Randie for participating today. I think that's some good information that a lot of us out in the educational world have to deal with. So it's nice to get a little bit of that information to address some of those questions. Want to point your attention to session 4. We're breaking new ground. For the first time ever, we're going to have an international speaker. It's the first time I remember anyway. I don't think we've ever done this before, but Dr. Donna Barry from Ireland is going to be a speaker, as well as Dr. Larry Keane at the Meat Animal Research Center. So looking forward to that. Your host next week is going to be Dr. Matt Spangler. And so looking forward to that session. I hope you guys will all join us again. Appreciate everybody joining us today, and we'll see you next week. Take care, and thanks again, Shane and Randie.
Thank you.
You bet, Darrh. Thank you.